I want to tell over an amazing story. Rabbi 𝗝𝗨𝗗𝗠, the Rosh Yeshiva and Mashgiach of Hebron, which is one of the best yeshivas in Israel, my son went to learn there, was asked to speak at the bris of a shared grandson of Rav Moshe Chevroni and the Ger Rabbi. Imagine, a skion of a big literature yeshiva married, the grandson of the Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron married the granddaughter of the Ger Rabbi. Very interesting how these two came together. This occasion was celebrated by prominent families and attended by many of the Torah giants of Eretz Yisrael. Included inside the audience were descendants of the 𝗝𝗨𝗗𝗏, the author of 𝗝𝗏𝗏𝗏, the author of Nevardik, the Vizhnitzer and Gerer Hasidic dynasties, and many others. During his address, Rabbi Sarna made the following remarkable statement. Everyone in this room believes that his grandfather did the most for Klal Yisrael in the last 100 years. And yes, you all could make a case for that. The 𝗝𝗨𝗏𝗏𝗏, the author of Nevardik, the author of 𝗝𝗏𝗏𝗏, and many Talmidim, and had established many prominent yeshivas. So did the Hasidic courts that were represented at this bris. I'm here to tell you that it's none of you that did the most for Klal Yisrael in the last 100 years. And everyone in the room gasped. I'll tell you even more. The one who did the most for Klal Yisrael in the last 100 years never learned a blot Gemara. Now the audience was spellbound. Where's he going with this? I'll tell you even more. When I mention the name of this person, you'll all agree with me that this individual did the most for the Jewish people in the last 100 years, and we wouldn't be around if we didn't have this person. Everyone in the room smiled and agreed, and he answered, Sarah Schneer was the legendary founder of the Beis Yaakov movement. A seamstress from Krakow, she observed how many Jewish girls were no longer interested in preserving the heritage of Yiddishkeit, being lured by the magnetic pull of the secular Haskalah or evolution. By the way, if you want to see a great video on the subject, on the night of Tisha B'Av, I presented a phenomenal concept, a phenomenal presentation of what created the Holocaust. How the Haskalah movement destroyed all the Eastern European communities. It was based on my Rebbe's book called Divine Madness with Rabbi Miller. It's on Torah Anytime. Kedai to watch it. I give a whole historical background as to what created the Holocaust and how Hashem's chilling prophecies in Chumash came true. Could I look at it? With the support and blessing of great Torah leaders, including the 𝗝𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and the Ger Rabbi, Sarah Schneer created a network of schools to educate young Jewish women. These schools inculcated their students with Torah values and an appreciation of who studies Torah, and motivated them to teach others what they learned. She created a whole pyramid scheme of teaching people who taught others, but more than that, she taught them what it means to study Torah and what it means to support a husband who's studying Torah. Without her efforts, it would have been impossible for the Jewish nation to survive. Therefore, without any kind of hesitation, she did the most for the Jewish people in the last 100 years. No man can rival what she did, not even up to her ankles. What creates our problems today? One of the things that I see that creates crises in dating and marriage is something called ego is the enemy. Ego. Right? You're brimming with ambition. You're young now. You've made some money. You feel comfortable about yourself. And now wherever you are, whatever you're doing, the worst enemy that already lives inside you, it's called your ego. Not me, you think. No one would ever call me an egomaniac. Perhaps you always thought of yourself as a pretty balanced person. But for people with ambition, talent, drive, which probably describes all of us, ego comes with the territory. Precisely what makes us so promising as thinkers and creatives and doers, what drives us to the top of those fields, makes us vulnerable to the darker side of this horrible midah. The ego that we have most commonly goes by a more casual definition. An unhealthy belief in our own importance. And all of us fall prey to this. And this is sometimes what gets in the way of a relationship and could drive a wedge through it. Self-centered feelings. That's the definition. It's that child inside every person that's a little petulant. The one that chooses getting his or her way over anything or anyone else. And unfortunately, could be driving the bar of more and more of the divorces that we see today. Slavy Youngreis writes the following. Rebbe Youngreis' daughter, she says, I can be at parties and I see a phenomenon that really disturbs me. A woman will come up to her to talk with her and she'll say to her, it's okay, I can replace him, there are other men. What happened? What happened to the belief that there was a concrete concept to what it meant to be married? And people could just dismiss that today. It's horrible. When the notion of ourselves and the world grows so inflated it begins to distort the reality, it can have horrible horrible consequences on our marriages. So I want to share that story with them now. They're going to enjoy it. A woman writes, I hesitate to tell this story because it hurts so much. It contains details that I prefer to forget and certainly not to publicize. But I know it also contains a message that I mustn't keep to myself because the number of women are going the way I did is growing all the time. She lives in Eretz Yisrael. I come from a traditional family. Initially we're not from, but since my parents sent us all to wonderful religious schools, we became a frum family. The kids helped drive the tshuva in that home. I was an exceptionally good girl, a little tzaddikus, and I stayed that way as I grew up. I'm telling you the truth, and I'm going to tell the truth about what came later, though it hurts me badly and it pains me. I married a Ben Torah from a fine frum family. We both had high aspirations to build a home solidly based on Torah and to raise our children accordingly. We were so pure and so innocent. We had 6 children closely spaced. My husband was a model husband. I was a model wife. He was the king in our home. I was the queen. We would sit and learn halacha together. We were devoted to each other's needs. And together we were devoted to our children. For 10 years it was like that. But we needed money. And I found a job with a company that pays a decent salary. Some of the women who worked there were religious, others were not. For the first month or so, I focused on working on my paycheck and nothing more. I just went in, I did my job, and went home. And then Esther came into my life. And look how insidious that influence can be. Esther was a non-religious woman in her 50s, a kind soul, who apparently, seemingly couldn't hurt a fly. She was like the mother to all the young women in the office. She had no children of her own. In fact, she never married. And she lavished all her maternal warmth on people like us. Esther found a place in my heart. I became good friends with her. And don't ask me how, but she drew me into her circle, her world. Not that she preached against religion. She wasn't a frum woman. She simply told me about her life. And it wasn't that her life was exotic or glamorous, but little by little it influenced my worldview. I have to point out something, the woman writes. In my high school years, I had girls like this in Beis Yaakov, but I knew what they were up to. So my defenses were up. I was careful. I had no problem resisting because I knew I had to be on guard against such girls who had certain influences in their lives, not as frum. But now the enticement was coming from a woman who could have been my mother, and my defenses were just not up. Why would I put up a guard against someone who looked and acted like she was a typical savta? After a couple of years of this, my hashkafas became completely eroded. Secular books, music, and movies became part of my life. I would spend hours discussing this material with Esther at home. I continued playing my role robotically, but no longer with the same pure-hearted dedication that I had when I first got married. I had turned into a two-faced woman. One day my husband happened to notice songs on my iPod that were not to his liking. He was shocked. Such things were not part of the life we had built together as a frum family. I reacted with the most effective defense. It's my life, don't tell me what to do. What happened to her? She metamorphosized into a completely different individual. I attacked him back. In the course of that argument, all my new opinions came rushing out like a geyser, like a dam breaking. I'll do what I please. No one's going to tell me what to do, she said to her husband. Only his stunned expression alerted me to the fact that such words had never been used between both of us. From there, things got worse. I told Esther what happened at home, and she said to me, she gave me advice, how to put my husband in his place. My husband was completely baffled. It was as if someone had taken the combination of the safe of his wife and made me completely inaccessible. He didn't know what had gotten into me. He couldn't even talk to me. A year of fighting wore down the bond we nurtured so carefully for years. One day, like that, I packed up, took the children, and moved back with my parents. Eventually, after the painful arbitration, we finalized our divorce. That quick! It was amazing. We were to share the custody of the kids. After that, there was a period of tension with all sorts of power games. My emotions were in a tangle. I soon realized that the children were suffering from my attitude, and then once I saw that, I managed to calm down and make peace with my reality. He started a new household and we married, and things settled down. But I entered a phase of my life that I would give any amount of money in the world if I could erase it. Welcome to the world of single parenting. You never want to go there. Believe me, if you have any alternative, don't go there. I won't elaborate. I'll just say that thousands of divorced women are going around today in a terrible state socially, spiritually, and financially. Most of the new friends I met initiated their own divorces. as I had. And in most cases, the husband did not want to get divorced. A respected dayan told me he issues many gets, that our readiness to choose divorce shows us today what's going on, that it's a new epidemic. And she says, and she writes that she wishes she had never gone that far. Anyway, she went into a more liberal lifestyle, having friends, going out, let's not go there. And she would share, as she shared custody with the husband. He had 3 more kids of his own from his second wife, and sometimes she would dump the 6 kids on his new wife and go out, whatever. One day, this new wife got sick, and she contracted the terminal cancer. And so now she couldn't take care of her 3, and now the first wife found herself taking care of all the kids. And after several years of chemotherapy, she said to her, I need to speak to you. So the first wife came up, and she was with one of her sons. She says, can you wait for me downstairs? She says, I know my time, the wife who was suffering from cancer, is coming up soon. I'm not going to be around very long. For the good of my husband and the good of the children, I'd like for you to remarry him. A wife knows her husband really well, and I know that he's never forgotten the wife of his youth, his Ashes Neurim. Please remarry him. I'm not going to be around much longer after I leave this world. It's important to make sure that you know the truth, that it's my honest wish, and I'm going to write it in my will. I didn't answer her, I couldn't. I was overwhelmed by her graciousness and nobility. And I embraced her for a long time, murmuring words of appreciation. The next week we received the news that she had returned her soul to her Creator. I attended the Levaya, and during the Shiva I provided meals for my husband and all 9 kids. After the Shloshim, a messenger came from Beis Din, a rabbi that we both knew, and he told me that the deceased had written in her will that she'd like her husband to marry his first wife again. I started to cry. I told him that I already knew about this. She spoke to me shortly before she passed away. He was astonished that I even knew about it. And I told him the answer is yes, emphatically yes. I decided to be straightforward about my intentions. I already paid a high enough price for ego games. We just spoke about ego. I know it sounds strange, but after I had a few dates with my former husband, we talked about what happened and we closed the door in the past. I wanted to tell him about the spiritual low point that I had hit, that I'd fallen to. But he didn't want to hear about it. He only wanted to know, can you go back to being the woman you used to be? The wife I remembered. We remarried, my husband fulfilling the rare mitzvah of remarrying the woman he had once divorced. Now years later we've united, blended family, 9 children, 3 of them married. One might say that the wound has been sewn up and healed, yet for me the scar remains. And that's how it has to be, because I'm not willing to forget what I went through. I need to hold on to that reminder how much a person has to guard himself in order to stay on the path that their soul truly desires, and to be very careful with the repercussions of who influences them in their life.